everybody. Before we get to the guest and the rest of the show, I wanted to take a minute and remind you that the podcast is moving. So, right now, we are produced by Explorations Early Learning and Jeff Johnson. Jeff is retiring at the end of 2025, so you're going to have to switch your feed at the end of this year. So, if you go to iTunes or to Spotify, and search that early childhood nerd, you'll see both feeds are there already. So one is produced by Explorations Early Learning. That's the current feed that you're probably following if you subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify. You'll also see one that says Early Childhood Nerd Work, and that's me. I'm going to be taking over production of the show and maybe starting a couple of other shows. So you can follow both of them now if you'd like. The nice thing about the Early Childhood Nerd Work one feed is that it currently has 80 or 83 episodes from the very beginning of the show when we started 9 years ago that aren't available anywhere else right now. So they're very baby steps kinds of episodes at the beginning. The sound quality is not the best, but the guests are amazing and the conversation's really good. The bottom line is at the end of 2025, Explorations Early Learning's version of the podcast will go away, and you will have to find the Early Childhood Nerd Work version and subscribe to that, or change your RSS feed there. Like I said, you can follow them both right now. And then when Explorations Early Learning goes away, you won't miss anything. It'll just already be there for you. So I hope you find it. Let me know if you have questions. You can email me or find me on social media or put a comment under this video if you're having trouble finding the show. And thank you for listening. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Bernt-Santy. Welcome to That Early Childhood Nerd. I was just startled by Zoom yelling at me. I wasn't expecting that. Anyway, I am thrilled to have Dr. Megan Madison on the show this week. She's been on at least once before, I think maybe a couple of times, but it's been a long time since we talked. So welcome, Megan. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It has
Yeah.
been a while.
Yeah.
I've missed you and our conversations, and I'm thrilled to be back.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. Would you please just tell folks about yourself? Whatever you want them to know, I think is fine with me.
Sure. So my full name is Dr. Megan Pamela Ruth Madison, and my pronouns are she and her and hers. I identify as a Black, queer, neuroexpansive, early childhood educator. And I've been in the field for over 15 years, maybe not yet 20. I was born in 1987. I'm a millennial. But
I
I haven't
graduated from
been
high school a year later.
amazing. They're nice benchmarks, right? Um, and I started my career in a Head Start preschool classroom in Chicago. I grew up in the Midwest. And from there, I pursued a PhD in education policy, focusing on early childhood education workforce policy, and thinking about systemic racism and learning about what critical race theory is and intersectionality is at Brandeis University. And along the way, I developed a practice as a teacher, so facilitating professional learning for mostly early childhood educators around race, gender, sexuality, a little bit around community organizing. And then after about a decade of doing that work, at the end of every workshop, teachers would ask, "What books do you recommend?" So when the pandemic hit and I lost my job and I was stuck at home, all of that knowledge got turned into a series of children's books called First Conversations that explore those same topics and many more. And at this point in my journey, I've now finally completed the PhD and we've finished the series of 8 books. And so, yeah, I have a little bit of space to reconnect with people like you and figure out what's next.
Great. So the late We Care is the latest in the series, right? That's the 8th that you just mentioned. So
There's
it's
actually
called
one more after We Care.
Okay, okay.
All of Us, a first conversation about disability, just came out like
Oh,
last month.
amazing.
We Care is number 7, and All
Yeah.
of Us is number 8.
Yeah, great. So it's called We Care, a first conversation about justice, and they're board book format books, right? Beautiful illustrations, powerful, uh, accessible for children. I mean, sometimes these kinds of books feel a little preachy, and what I love is that yours is just matter of fact and real and accessible to that level, but also you include a guide at the end of each book, right? Further thoughts or how to use it or what to do with that kind of thing. Do you want to talk just about the book process and the format a little bit?
Sure. And also, thank you for that feedback. I mean, coming from an early childhood educator and fellow early childhood nerd, that feedback means so much to
Yeah.
me. Yeah, the books were originally conceived as a board book series, and they
Mhm.
are all available in board book. And then a couple years into the project, teachers requested that we also publish them in a picture book format because they're a little bit
Mhm.
easier for a read aloud in the
Right.
classroom. Um, but I love the idea that they're board books because for me, the board book, um, it conveys the message that this book belongs to the child and
Yeah.
that it doesn't need necessarily an adult to mediate, to pull it off the shelf or to
Mhm.
carefully pull the pages. There's much about, flipping through the book and looking at the pictures and ignoring the words or
Mhm.
sticking in your mouth and chewing on it, as they
Yes.
are about the content.
Yeah.
And the words, of course they are for young children, but they're also for us as adults. I mean, very few of us, even those of us with PhDs in education, got real training about
Mhm.
what is systemic racism and
Mhm.
how to talk about it in language that kids can understand. And so the text in the books is really designed to support us as adults, people who are brand new to this, especially I think about new parents
Mhm.
who are really like, oh, I know this is really important and I want to raise an awesome, upstander kid, but
Yes.
how?
Mhm.
These books, before a child is even able to understand the words, they give the parent an opportunity to practice saying those
Mhm.
words out
Mhm.
loud so that by the time the kid is 2 or 3 or 4, they have some reps under their belt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, the illustrations, I feel so grateful to have gotten to work with some really talented illustrators, because the illustrations in the books mirror the content of the books,
Mhm.
in terms of the diverse and inclusive characters, that are represented in the books,
Mhm.
but also the storylines,
Right.
that the characters are going through. And we've gotten great feedback from parents and teachers that, especially pre-readers, the really young kids, they are paying such close
Mhm.
attention to those characters in the illustrations and finding, oh, that one looks like me, or, ooh, what's going on there? And
Yeah.
those, as much as there are reflection questions, sprinkled throughout all of the books in hopes to open those conversations between adult and child, but the images in and of
Right.
themselves are question openers.
Right. It's a really beautiful real world example of the mirrors and windows. You want children to see a mirror themselves reflected, but they also want to
Yes,
see windows to the larger world reflected.
yes,
And again, just in a very this is real life kind of a way. Yeah.
yeah,
So just to start with a quote, because that's what I have to do this many years in. One of the things that I wanted that really stood out to me. Sorry, I'm stumbling because I'm trying to do two things in my brain at once. But I really like just this starter piece here from the book. Justice is how we work on a problem together as a community to make things right again for everyone. And before I invite you to speak to that and talk more about the actual story of the book, this won't be any news to you. This is a scary time for people who want to do anti-bias work or inclusive work.
yeah,
Um, Lots of states doing wild, like Indiana, has made it um, sort of against the rules to use DEI language or so in as a professor, I'm scrambling. How do I keep the content in? um, without losing my ability to speak to the content with people. Um, and so I think justice is just on a lot of people's minds right now, both because of that and larger issues. Um, and you think, obviously, because you wrote this book, that it's okay to include children in that work.
Yeah. Thank you for naming that context. I'm working on a big grant application right now to evaluate the impact of the books and study how progressive teachers are using these books and others like them in the
Mhm.
classroom, particularly in this challenging social and political context. And as you know, as part of writing grant applications, you have to review the literature.
Yeah.
And there was a study that the Rand Corporation did in 2023. So this was even before the most recent presidential election.
Mhm.
It was something like 50% of teachers, and that was broadly conceived, pre-K all the way through 12. But 50% of teachers in the United States are subject to local or state laws restricting their ability to talk about topics like race and gender in the classroom.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that is true in the United States, and scarily, it's true around the world. I believe, and you will know this if you've read any of the books, I believe in calling a spade a spade.
Yes.
So fascism is rising globally.
Mhm.
And teachers are on the front lines of that fight. And it creates genuine ethical dilemmas.
Mhm.
Like if we know that anti-bias education is a core component of developmentally appropriate practice, and we have an ethical responsibility to not harm children, and we know that
Mhm. Do
racism and
no harm.
sexism and patriarchy harm children,
Mhm.
what are teachers supposed to do? When the law, whether that is coming from an administrator or a local school board or from the White House, is saying that you are legally required to do things that you know are not in the best interests of children and their families and our communities. It's not easy, and I'm not going to pretend it's easy.
Mhm.
And I'm really grateful for you naming that reality,
Mhm.
because it's something that so many educators are grappling with right now.
Yeah. I had a really interesting conversation. The class that I taught over the summer was our, cognitive curriculum class, so it's math and science and social studies, and trying to talk with the students about social studies at a, birth to 5 level. So much of it is just understanding difference and understanding who makes up your world and who makes up your neighborhood, and it was really interesting to see them, sort of connect. Well, now I have another way of kind of backing up what I want to do, and I want to
Yes.
be, um, you know, naming the issues and talking about race and gender and things like that, with children and their families, and now I can say, "Oh, it's one of the social studies standards. I have to do
Yes.
this."
Yes.
So
100%.
your books are social studies too.
They
Right.
are. They are indeed social studies. They're social
Yeah.
studies. They're social emotional learning.
Yeah.
They're development of the appropriate practice.
Uh-huh.
And very intentionally, they're aligned with the anti-bias education framework,
Mhm.
which is a NACE, a National Association for the Education of Young Children
Mhm.
publication. The second edition is out now, and I think is a huge improvement on the first and the
Oh,
second. I
okay.
think
Yeah.
good books evolve over time, and the
Uh-huh.
most
Uh-huh.
recent edition is in my mind, like a required text in every early childhood educator's library. And at the core of that text is a framework that says every child has a right to an educational environment that supports four core goals:
Mhm.
their development of a strong sense of identity, which means they know who they are, they feel good about who they are, they have language, accurate and appropriate language to describe who they are. The second is diversity. So
Mhm.
that's developing them with the skills exactly like you were talking about, to engage with difference, to
Mhm.
understand not everybody in the world is exactly the same as who they are,
Yeah.
and have accurate and appropriate language to describe differences that they see in their community and that they will encounter in the world and in their throughout the course of their lives. And I've found most early childhood educators are pretty confident with those first two, identity and diversity.
Uh-huh.
And most of the books in the First Conversation series, it's like the first 10 pages really focus on that identity and diversity piece. And then you turn the page to spread 13, we call it in Our Skin, which is the one everybody gets mad about.
Uh-huh.
But it's where you turn into goals 3 and 4. And goal 3 is about justice. And that's equipping kids with language to describe the really big, unfair systems in our world, like
Mm-hmm.
racism, like patriarchy, of course, in kid appropriate language. But there are so many examples all around us in our own communities that we can use to help kids understand
Mm-hmm.
that there are big unfair
Right.
patterns, and that it's okay to feel angry and sad and confused when they notice them. And then goal 4, we can't leave kids in that state of feeling angry and confused and
Yeah.
overwhelmed. We also have a responsibility to partner with them to take action and to
Mm-hmm.
make a difference in their communities and in their world, so that our world can be more fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In We Care, um, there's representation of people experiencing homelessness, right?
Yes.
There's illustrations of unhoused folks, and uh, you write transformative justice are big words that mean people working together to solve problems and to make a community healthy again. It can take a long time, but there's always a solution. Um,
Yes.
and I thought, that comes after the illustrations of people in tents in a park, and uh, one then illustration or the next page is different ideas about solving the problem, and one is a child putting bag lunches together, and the next illustration is a man in a prison cell, and
Yeah.
when I first looked at it, I was like, "Whoa, that's big." But if children are seeing, unhoused people on the street, they're wondering, that they know that, just what you said, they know that that's unfair.
Yes.
And we have a choice then to be the educator who tells them to ignore it, or the educator that helps them navigate through those feelings and that thinking and look at solutions.
Yes. That example came directly from my own practice. I have lived in New York City for about the last 10 years, and there's definitely an epidemic of homelessness
Mhm.
across many different kinds of contexts in the United States and around the world. But in New York City, you can't really be a 4-year-old who walks, to the subway without encountering someone who is
Mhm.
currently experiencing homelessness. And kids notice, every child I've worked with have noticed and wondered what's going on here and how do
Right.
we respond? Um, and kids have amazing ideas. It's never just a one-off conversation, but I remember a conversation I had with a 4-year-old who was like, "Well, why are people homeless?" And I was like, "Well, um, because some people don't have the money that you need to pay rent to have a place to
Mhm.
live." And then, of course, he asked, "Well, why don't they have money? My parents just get money, they go to the ATM, and then
Yeah.
the money comes out."
Uh-huh.
you know so why don't they do they need one of those plastic cards that you take to the ATM? Like, why don't they have enough money?
Mhm. Mhm.
And the conversation went on and on for weeks, but I remember that the child's proposed solution at the beginning of our conversation was, "I think we should just install like those ATM machines everywhere, but everybody should get a free card so that if you need money, you just go to the machine and it gives you the money you need
Yes.
so that you can pay your rent or you can buy food." And
Yeah.
I love the way that um, these encounters offer opportunities to really partner with children in their
Mhm.
thinking.
Yeah.
Um,
It also shows how they connect immediately to their own experience. Well, my
yes,
parents just get money from the machine, and they get it
yeah,
with a card. So if everyone had that access, that would solve the problem. So
yes,
just being the nerd, it's interesting to see that thought process and to think about it developmentally, but also it's such an opportunity to expand it a little, like
exactly.
looking out at others and out at experiences that are different from what's familiar, which is key to this
Yes,
kind of work.
yes, yeah. So that child is now probably 15, but the elementary school, the early childhood program where he went, I'm still connected to and have worked with other children. and recently did an author visit at that school. And the school is very close to Columbia University, where over the course of the last year, there was a big student encampment. And the kids definitely encountered that on their walk from the subway to the school, because it was a big deal. They shut down campus. It was on the news. You could hear people chanting day after day after day. And so it wasn't exactly the same as the example in the illustration of We Care, but it was an opportunity to teach that vocabulary of encampment and talk about how people sometimes sleep in tents for lots of different reasons. And the children were very interested in how they could be in support of what was going on. We ended up connecting with a nonprofit in New York City that's helping to organize homeless folks or people experiencing homelessness, because one of the things that the children had a strong emotional response to was the idea of a sweep. It was language that many of the kids had never learned before. And there's a scene of a protest in the book, and one of the signs says, "Stop the sweeps." And so the kids, of course, are like, "What is a sweep?" And it happened at Columbia's campus, and it happens every day in New York City to other encampments of homeless folks. And the kids were really like, "What? Like, the police will come and they'll take your stuff and they'll put you in jail, even if you didn't do anything wrong? Even if you didn't break any rules and you didn't hurt anybody and you didn't steal anything?" And they were just like, "Whoa, that's so unfair." And it really highlighted for them the idea that incarceration doesn't really have a logic to it, that the logic is punishment, and that many of them had personal experiences of punishment and know that, like, they get why
Sometimes
punishment
it's unfair.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel good, and sometimes it's unfair. If you're sent to timeout, but you didn't do it, your friend did it, Like, they really had a strong emotional response. And it was amazing to find connections where the children were able to participate in local community organizing efforts in a really meaningful way. Not, of course, being there on the front lines of the protest. I mean, occasionally at a kid-friendly protest, but maybe helping make signs, or maybe making sandwiches for people at the encampment, or maybe posting on social media, their artwork or their feelings about a particular issue, or writing letters to local politicians and Congress people, or signing petitions. I mean, especially for young kids for whom writing their name is one of the first words that they know how to write on their own. To sign a petition with their own name, I mean, can be such a meaningful and developmentally appropriate way that kids can engage in activism at the local level and at the national level.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, Dr. Megan, that your books have been banned or have faced being banned.
Yes, they have. And it's not, this area of book banning and censorship is not, my wheelhouse. So I've learned a lot. I've gotten a crash course in the last 4 years. And it's really a big problem. The banning of books in the United States is growing exponentially. And it doesn't mean that a book is not allowed to be read. That can be important to explain to kids. But it does mean that in a school library or a local library, someone will come to the library and fill out a form that says they believe this particular book is inappropriate for whatever reason. And occasionally that library or that school board will agree with that assessment, and they will remove the book. So it will no longer be available in that school library or in that local public library. And that restricts access to really important ideas. And that's not good for democracy, and it's not good for kids. So another thing I learned is that a lot of the reporting on book bans talks about how there's lots of them happening right now, but doesn't get it, like, so what's underneath it? Because it can kind of seem like, whoa, there's just hundreds of thousands of Americans who are pro book banning these days. Where did that come from? That's what it seems like. Well, it turns out, I forget what year, it's like 2022, somebody did the analysis, and they were like, more than 50% of the book challenges and bans were advanced by 11 people.
Wow.
So it is not this mass movement of people. It is a small group of people. Between the two of us, we probably can gather 11 people on a Zoom tomorrow if we really
Yeah.
wanted to. It's a small number of people, but they're
Mhm.
well connected and they're well organized. And so it's our job on the other side to get as well connected and well organized. And the number one group that's advancing these is called Moms for Liberty,
Yeah.
which sounds, they're good at having these like nice sounding
Yeah, hard to
names.
argue with liberty, right?
Exactly. And
Or
like, who doesn't
moms.
love a
Yeah.
mom? I love moms, right? And they are advancing this narrative that it's about parental rights, that parents
Mhm.
should be the ones who get to decide. And I agree. Parents are very important partners in advancing these kinds of conversations. But I don't believe that anyone, even an awesome mom, should have the right to decide what everybody's kids have
Right.
access to. And a lot of their work is happening at the school board level. So if you are not already attending your local school board meetings or your library meetings, that is one place to start. And honestly, that's how I started getting involved. There was Moms for Liberty, a couple moms affiliated with Moms for Liberty in New York City, and I was pretty scared. But one day I just hopped on the train and I showed up at the school
Mhm.
board meeting. And that first meeting was pretty terrible. But the second meeting, I was like, I'm not going to come alone next time. I got to bring a friend. So I
Mhm.
brought 2 or 3 friends, and it was still pretty terrible, but I wasn't alone. And maybe once we really made a team effort of it, I'd say there were probably took us about 18 months and 600 volunteers,
Wow.
working somewhere between 3 and 10 hours a week volunteer. But we were able to get those Moms for Liberty candidates voted off the school board. Um, and that I feel very, very proud of. And I think is, something that anybody can do.
Right. I think I have heard, and I couldn't name right now the source, um, but, we all think that the greatest threat is from our kind of national elections and the national candidates. But what I'm hearing more and more is that they really do have, they being the people trying to take what, erase DEI and ban books and maintain white supremacy, um, are really well organized at the local levels, and it's the local elections that we're going to have the most power with, and school board comes up in just about every conversation.
100%. I
Yeah.
mean, this is where I get my real policy nerd on. Um, but I think,
I mean, we should
after,
vote in all of them, right? We
yeah,
should vote in all the elections, right? But
yeah,
but we
yeah,
ignore the small because we're thinking about the bigger.
of course, of course. I mean, I think so. When I look back at how we got here, there's a long, long story, and then there's a shorter version of that story. And when we look back to, for example, in my lifetime, we elected the first Black president in the United States of America. So, given the fact that this country was founded on 250 plus years of legal racial oppression,
Mhm.
um, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And at every chapter in American history, we have seen, after there is racial progress, a major white
Right.
backlash. We saw it after Reconstruction. We saw it after the Civil Rights Movement. We're seeing it now.
Yes.
So after Obama, we had Trump.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks, I'm sure you and me included, worked our butts off, and we got Biden elected.
Mhm.
And I'm not actually a huge Biden fan, but I do think, in the harm reduction
Right.
framework, better than a fascist in the
Right.
White House. And when that happened, far right actors didn't give up. They
Mhm.
didn't give in to despair. They said, you know what we got to do? We got to build the political will and the momentum at the local level. And so
Mhm.
they got to work. They
Mhm.
ran for their school boards, they ran for their library boards, they ran for city council, and they built both narrative, power, and momentum that enabled them to put Trump in the White House after that. And I think it makes so much sense for us to feel extreme despair and overwhelm in this moment, because what is happening right now is truly terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can take a lesson from the far right playbook and say, if we stand a chance in the next presidential election at the federal level, this is our time right
Mm-hmm.
now to get engaged at the local
At
level.
the local level.
Yeah, run for your school board, run for your PTA, run for your library board. Get involved in city council, figure out who your governor is, get your state representatives on speed dial. Because all of those local elections at the local and the state level really do matter, in addition to the federal politics, for sure.
A lot of this has suddenly turned into a real veering off the original part of the conversation, but that's okay with me. I think a lot of communities offer support and even training for candidates who want to maybe run for the first time or run for something
Yes,
local. So
that's an
if that's
amazing organization. It's called Run for Something.
run for something. I didn't
Check
even
it out.
realize I was saying the name of it, but
Yes.
yeah.
There's
So,
another organization, Public School Strong,
uh-huh,
that I recommend reaching out to. They're kind of a national network of people organizing on school boards at the local level.
yeah.
And I will also say, maybe electoral stuff isn't your jam. Maybe
Mhm.
you're more into community-based issues. There is no one right way to make
Right.
change, except I will say that we need to work together, and that working and making change collectively and in organized groups of people is much more powerful than what we can do as single individuals.
Mhm.
So if you do not yet have a political home, that's your assignment, is to figure out, not just who to vote for, but who you're going to organize with. And
Yeah.
maybe that's your local AEYC chapter. Maybe there's a local community-based group. Maybe it's your church or your synagogue, right? There's no one right place,
Mhm.
but you got to find your group of people and figure out how to make collective action.
Mhm.
Because that's what's really going to sustain the work long term,
Right.
because
And
otherwise you're going to
sustain
try and make
us
change on your own. Yes,
in the work, right? To have that connection.
exactly.
So that feels like a little bit of a hopeful upswing from where it felt like we were for a while in the conversation. So do you have I didn't ask, so I'm sorry, I didn't ask you if I could ask this because I just thought of it. But do you have like stories of hope that have come from these books or your conversations with people or your interactions with children and teachers as a result of writing these books?
Oh, yes. Okay, I have two.
I
I
thought you
have
would.
one. I have one really small one and
Uh-huh,
one bigger one.
uh-huh.
Um, and it's a great question. You're very welcome. Thank you for asking it.
Yeah.
So the small one is, I got an email the other day from a friend of a friend who has been reading We Care with her young child. I think
Mhm.
he's somewhere between 3 and 5. I want to say 4, but I'm not quite sure. Somewhere in that range. And the they've been reading it, many days before bed, and he's been really paying attention to the images.
Mhm.
The words are a little bit interesting, but he's really paying attention to the words. And in the illustrations, there is an image of a homeless encampment, and there are families, including young children, in the encampment.
Mhm.
And so he was asking, Mama, do kids go to jail too when there's a sweep?
Oh.
Because he was making a personal connection with the kid in the
Mhm.
illustrations, and you turn the page and one of the adults is
Is in
incarcerated.
jail, yeah.
And the mom said, no, I mean, not usually. She didn't get into the fact that there are many, many children right now in ICE detention facilities. That was
Mm.
too much right before bed. Um, but
Yeah.
she was like, not really. And so he said, okay, well, maybe us kids, maybe we can go to the jail and we can, sneak in between the bars. We can sneak some food and some toys and some blankets to make it easier, because the jail
Mhm.
cell is pretty bare. And she had to explain, well, actually, in prisons and jails, you're not really allowed to get in like that, and you can't share resources. And so the kid thought, like, okay, I got to come up with another solution to this. And the kid, on his own, he was like, well, Mama, I think the next protest we go to, I want to write a sign that says, no more police. And she
Oh.
said, okay, tell me more about that,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? Um, and he said, well, I just think that if you're already a police officer or you work in a prison, you should just get a different job. And that story gives me so much
Yes.
hope because,
Yes.
I have, of course, my abolitionist agenda, but I also really hold that I want children to be able to think for themselves
Right.
and come
Yes.
to their own conclusions. So I just felt like what a win that this book, and not even the words in the book, but the
Right.
illustrations of the book provided an opening for a child to have a conversation with an adult they love and feel safe with, and to talk through their
Mm-hmm.
own thinking about both the problems and the solutions,
Mm-hmm.
and then to figure out a really logical solution.
Right. It's like
It's
the
just,
opposite of indoctrination.
exactly. Oh gosh. Yeah, I got to send that quote to everybody because that's what we're accused of. That's what the book
Yes.
banners accused me of,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
indoctrinating kids. And, you know, oh, a part of me wishes it was that easy, but I
Yeah.
do think sustainable change happens when kids are supported to become critical thinkers and think for
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And they're going to come up with solutions sometimes that are beyond what we as adults can think of.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my little story. And then
Yeah.
the big story is the fact that we managed to organize 600 volunteers in my
That's
local school
amazing.
board to get these Moms for Liberty people kicked off. And what was particularly hopeful to me about that is that it was a story about coalition building.
Mm-hmm.
So I showed up at my first meeting because I was pissed off about book banning. But what was interesting to learn is that at that next meeting, they changed, they kind of let go of the book banning thing and started focusing on picking on trans kids. They were like,
Yeah.
oh, we finally have some resistance. This isn't going to look good. Let's let that go. Let's move on to the next agenda
Right.
item. And, I have some experience teaching teachers about how to talk about gender and gender justice, but trans justice is not my wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where I have lots of expertise or many relationships. So I reached out to my friend Elena Daniels, who's the executive director of an organization called Transformative Schools, which is building a middle school for trans kids in New York City. And Elena came with me to the meeting, and between the two of us, we were able to get a whole bunch of people to show up to these meetings who care about a whole bunch of different issues. So there were trans adults who don't have kids, who aren't parents, who are willing to show up to school board meetings because they care about being the grown-ups that didn't
Mm-hmm.
exist when they were trans
Mm-hmm.
children. And there were authors who were showing up to fight for trans kids who originally got involved because they were worried about book bans. And at some point, all kinds of other things came into the mix. Weaponized accusations of anti-Semitism, major issues around school segregation. And there were just all these different people from all kinds of walks of life, some of whom had children of their own, and some who were just concerned community members,
Mm-hmm.
who were all showing up together and kind of working side by side on the shared agenda, even though we didn't know each other in advance. And we were all brought to the issue for different reasons,
Uh-huh.
and that really filled me with a lot of hope, because I also think sometimes in progressive or lefty spaces, we get really passionate about one issue. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're only going to care about early childhood education, or we're only going to care about immigration justice, or we only care about racial justice. But the right, especially the far right, they know how to build coalitions. I mean,
Yes.
they know how to, for all kinds of different reasons, get people into the same room working on a shared agenda, even if they're in it for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're going to defeat those forces and truly forge a healthy, thriving, multiracial democracy for the kids of this generation and kids for generations to come, we're going to have to learn how to work together across our differences and across these different issue areas. And I think, yeah, having done it, I now know that it's possible.
It's possible.
It's
That's a
possible.
that's a good catchphrase for winding down the conversation. This, as I knew it would be, has been fun, but also really even challenging me to think and work and explore and grow myself. So I thank you so much for being here and for talking. Also, I just love the idea of you being passionate in the park and people walking by and hearing your side of things. I haven't seen anybody. I just like imagining them going home with that story to tell. And maybe
Yeah,
that's spreading some hope too. I will include in the show notes because I'm sure folks are going to want to come find you now,
great.
where to find your books and some more of your work. So if you're been listening and wondering how to get more of that, check the show notes. And just again, thank you for spending time with me today.
Thank you. My
Yeah.
cheeks are sore from all of these smiles. I
I
feel
was
so
thinking the same
energized.
thing. Yeah.
Thank
Um,
you for the
so
work
I
that you do and for
oh,
inviting me to be a part of it.
oh, anytime, honestly. But this was really a great conversation. And thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.